Welcome back, Miners. My name is Nathan Asbell. I'm a therapist here at Student Wellbeing at S&T University.
And my name's Amber Johnston, and I'm also a counselor here at Student Wellbeing. And it's time for your morning cup of joe. So when relationships are going well, it is fantastic. But when they're struggling, it can be catastrophic. So let's talk about the day-to-day warning signs that a relationship is in trouble.
Okay, sounds good.
So, Nathan, have you ever heard of John Gottman and his four horsemen of the apocalypse?
Yes, I have.
Well, I know Gottman's one of your favorites, so I'd like to go over today John Gottman's Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse and the movie Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind.
Okay.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is a movie that was made in the early 2000s, wherein a cautious, untrusting, low-key Joel, who's played by Jim Carrey, is involved in a relationship and breakup with the adventurous, free-spirited Clementine, who's portrayed by Kate Winslet. After the breakup, Clementine takes a pill, which allows her to forget Joel completely, and Joel is even more heartbroken at being forgotten just beyond the breakup. And he decides that he wants to take the pill as well and forget everything about their entire relationship because he wants the pain to stop.
Right, because not only do I not like you anymore and I don't want to be with you, it's also that it's so bad I don't even want to remember you. I want to erase you as if we'd never met. And that negates all of the good times, all of the wonderful things, including all of the bad times. And so it's totally this idea, it's not just rejection, but it's like, I wish I'd never met you.
Right, and that's what he was going for. He wanted to forget Clementine. He wanted to forget the relationship. He wanted to stop hurting because in theoretically, to forget the entire relationship and to forget Clementine herself would stop the pain that he was feeling every day. So the relationship was one where kind of started out on the whole premise of opposites attract, but the differences in them are what really drew them together and also led to a lot of the resentment and the eventual breakup.
So it's the idea that, he's straight-laced, she's free spirit, and so this kind of adds to the adventure, but also adds to the level of conflict.
Right. And I've heard her arguably called a manic pixie girl before, manic pixie dream girl before with that trope. But she's got a little bit more depth than most characters of that kind. But she definitely has that feeling about her, just very eclectic and a free spirit and independent. So when we meet someone, we create in our mind an idealized version of that person. It's like a blueprint in our mind of who that person is. And this is eventually broken by reality. So as we get to know this person more and learn more and more about them, we may learn that somebody doesn't fit completely into the mold that our mind created when we initially met them.
And on the flip side, when you first start dating someone, you don't show them all the warts and scars. You put on your best face. You put your best foot forward. You're putting on the facade. You're trying to show them that you were someone that's desirable, someone that they want to date. Mm-hmm. You're trying to impress the other person. And so with an idealized version of that person and them presenting an almost unrealistic version of themselves to you, one that's unsustainable, then it's easy for us to get really caught up in the moment when it all begins. But then over time, the facade drops, the idealized version of the person fails, and then we're left with the stark reality of, wow, this is the human being that I've decided to be with, and do I want to continue to be with them?
Right. They're three-dimensional. They become a three-dimensional person rather than a two-dimensional image. And that version, the two-dimensional image, is just not realistic, and it conflicts often with the idealized vision that we have in our head of that person. And in this stage, our ideas of the person are essentially two-dimensional when people are really three-dimensional, and this is called the honeymoon phase.
Right. But then the three-dimensional person that steps out of the honeymoon phase creates conflict with the confabulation, this whole made-up world. It just now is two people in a relationship, and now the question oftentimes asked is, where do we go from here?
Right. So between 6 months and 2 years into a relationship, the honeymoon phase starts to end. And we start to see the other person for who they really are, those warts that you talked about, and all. Like we start seeing the pieces of that person's authentic self coming through and kind of blurring that idealized version. We may learn that person that we think of as a neat freak is actually somebody that has a secret closet in their house that's just stuffed full of junk. And so that kind of conflicts with that idea of that person being a minimalist and neat and organized, and so we have to put those pieces together because we do have depth. We're not a character written for a movie, or we have depth and idiosyncrasies about us. All of us do.
Absolutely. And what's even interesting is that even then our snap judgments once the honeymoon wears off oftentimes aren't accurate. Because yes, someone might have a closet full of stuff that's random and crazy, but that's just the one place in their life they allow themselves to be that way. But the rest of them really is a neat person, so we're saying, wait, are they really what I think they are? And maybe yes, maybe no. And so there's a lot of that. It's like you have to rediscover the person you're with.
Right. And because the snap judgments are black and white. And what we learn over the course of getting past that honeymoon phase and into a real relationship phase is that we learn that people are just shades of gray. Like there's no black or white about it. They all fit into this middle ground where nobody is completely a neat freak and nobody's completely a mess.
And oftentimes the masks we portray to someone that we're trying to attract are oftentimes what we in our own mind envision would be our ideal self.
Oh yes, there's absolutely some projecting going on there.
Right, and so just recognizing that someone when they're putting on that facade, unless they're just making themselves up completely to try to match with you, then that's huge red flags. Right, but if they're trying to present the best version of themselves, well then we get to choose in the relationship if we want to help them to pursue that or not. And vice versa. They want to help us pursue our best version of ourselves.
Right. And so with this time when we start seeing these we start seeing the real authentic person come through is when we start seeing those bad habits that some of them may have been present from the beginning, but we kind of glossed them over, made them not as big of a deal as they really are. And maybe we even thought they were cute. And at this phase, they start to become more grating. And the fights start. And this is when we really see this in the movie as the director begins to retrace the fights that the couple has and shows the depth that each person has beyond the initial idealized version that they had of each other. And we see Joel and Clementine become three-dimensional people instead of two-dimensional images or snapshots of themselves.
Right.
So this is the make it or break it time for any relationship, and although the effects of it can be seen later on in relationships, we continue to see our partner as a real person and their real actions and behaviors. So this is the point where we kind of go into that realness. So Gottman and the Horsemen. Gottman found that he could predict with a high level of accuracy the couples that would stay together versus the couples that would break up. And it was based on his observations of 4 key behaviors. And he called them the 4 horsemen. And these behaviors were present and in greater frequency and more degrees the more quickly the relationship would end.
Here, what's interesting about these different 4 horsemen is that Gottman could predict whether you'd be in a relationship in 5 years.
Yes.
By spending 20 minutes with you and your partner. He could tell within 20 minutes whether you'd be married or together in 5 years with over 90% accuracy.
Right.
Which is phenomenal. I mean, there are very few things in life that we can predict with such high accuracy as he can. And he said there's nothing special he does, there's no magic to it, he just looks for the 4 horsemen. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's some other indicators as well, but the 4 horsemen really determine whether or not you're going to be with someone in 5 years. And if you can overcome the 4 horsemen, then you have a much greater chance of having not only a longer relationship, but also a healthier and happier relationship. because the four horsemen really tear down and degrade the relationship until people are like, yeah, let's take a pill and forget.
Right. So the first horseman is criticism. Criticism is an attack. This is this isn't constructive criticism, like where you're trying to voice a complaint in a constructive way. This is the, you never do this, you always do this. It's an
Why
attack.
can't you understand this? Why can't you get this right? Yeah,
Right.
It's personal. It's you're not simply criticizing a behavior or a pattern of behavior that maybe someone has picked up over a lifetime. You're criticizing the individual.
Right. This is an attack directly on the person. And it's the core of it is questioning that person's character. It's not addressing a behavior. And so a complaint says, I feel really frustrated when you didn't take the trash to the curb when I asked you to. A criticism says, you never take the trash out.
Well, it's also, you're so dumb. Why can't you just take the trash out?
Right.
And there's another part of it. There's another piece, another horseman involved in that as well that we'll get to. Mm-hmm. But the criticism is an attack on the person, not an attack on the behavior. And trust me when I say that, having been married for 17 years, some behaviors need to change. Some of my behaviors growing up, not all of us grew up in a perfectly healthy, 100% perfectly angelic home. My parents weren't perfect. And so there are bad habits that I've picked up that I've had to tone down, work on, as my wife has said, hey, I'd really like you to work on this, not being so snappy at home. And so there are things that I've had to do. But one thing that my wife doesn't do is she doesn't come up and say, you're an idiot. You're so stupid. Why can't you do this? She doesn't attack me as a person.
Right. And that's the core difference between criticism and a complaint is that when criticism, you come from a place where you are attacking the other person, and a complaint is just saying you're attacking a behavior. And so there is a huge difference in it, and we've got to be cognizant. And like you said, not all of us grew up in great environments. Not all of us had positive examples. But also, add to that, we should always be learning and be cognizant of our own actions so that we can continue to grow as people. So this isn't anything that anybody's ever immune to. So in order to combat criticism, we should always use I statements. We should talk about our feelings and express our needs in a positive way. So the next horseman is contempt.
Contempt is one of the most destructive of the four.
Yes, absolutely. Contempt is when you're being truly mean to the other person. We're mocking the other person. We're using sarcasm. We're calling them names. We saw it so much in the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial when Amber Heard was calling Johnny Depp a baby and saying, why don't you grow up, Johnny? The idea here is that the speaker is trying to make the other person feel worthless, or that put the speaker in a position above the other person. Like, I am better, I am worth more, you're just a piece of crud on my shoe.
Yeah. What's really interesting, so let's talk about this for a minute. Sarcasm comes from sarcasm, which means to tear or rip. So if you can imagine, every time you use bitter, biting sarcasm in a relationship, imagine reaching up to your partner's back and peeling off a layer of flesh.
Right.
Because that's what you're doing emotionally. Now, don't get me wrong. My wife and I have some healthy sarcasm where we joke and josh with each other a bit, and we get laughing, and we're playful with sarcasm. And playful sarcasm can be healthy. But we're talking about the contemptuousness of that sarcasm where, we say something that's very biting. Or there's also the one where we engage in mockery. Well, I think this, blah, 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 blah. That is mocking, where we, roll our eyes and we say something snarky to what the other person said that demeans or degrades what they're saying.
And this is huge in media. Like, go to shows like Big Bang Theory and Friends and watch them without the laugh tracks. Like, just turn off the laugh tracks and watch these shows and the way that they treat each other. And it's wow.
Yeah. I mean, you take away the bazinga and you're left with some really unhealthy and even abusive stuff. Lots of contempt thrown around. Contempt for the friends one for another and in their romantic relationships. It's surprising that they are together at all half the time, because if my friends treated me that way, I don't know if I would be their friend anymore. It's just I wouldn't want to associate with someone that would tore me down when I was with them like that.
Right. But we don't think about it because there's a laugh track, and then we laugh because the point of sarcasm is a joke at the other person's expense.
Right. Part of what contempt really does is contempt kind of gives that unheard of message that I am better than you and you disgust me.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's that disgust, that sense of like, I'm not attacking your behavior, I am attacking you.
Yes.
As a human being. And like I said, sometimes when we are criticizing, it's so easy to roll right into contempt. Mm-hmm. Like, I told you to do this. Why can't you do this? Like, and then if the argument progresses, are you too stupid to do this? Are you like too dumb to understand the trash needs to go out? And so you can see it progress from criticism to contempt, and it's like that thing. Like, I even feel bad but like even making up contemptuous statements, because it feels bad to me to say stuff like that, even though I'm not addressing you, Amber, as a person, or I'm certainly not talking about my wife, because by golly, I take the trash out and I'm the one that forgets on occasion. But it's like, it feels bad to say I'm disgusted with anyone. You disgust me. That is not a good feeling in my soul. It goes against my personal values is what it is. And so we could talk about contempt all day. It's a large category, but I think we've got a couple more. Mm-hmm. So what should we be doing instead of engaging in contempt?
We should be building appreciation for our partner, and we should find gratitude for the positive actions that person has done, and remind ourselves of their good qualities, because there's a reason why we started getting with this person to begin with, and we need to remind ourselves of those. And this is only if it's not an abusive relationship. Like, if there is abuse of any kind, then it shouldn't be about just focusing on what the good the person does.
Right.
But if this is a typical relationship and this person, you're feeling starting to go into this contempt cycle, then you can start doing gratitude. Sometimes you can have you can write letters to each other about what you're grateful for, leave notes for each other, Post-its. There's a lot of ways that you can show gratitude, but it's just letting the other person know in a real way that you're grateful for their role in your life.
It's also important to remember that for me, if my spouse forgets to do something, it's because, and I have to remind myself, she's a human being, and she can only keep so much in her head at once. And so if she forgets something, I simply chalk it up to, it's not personal. It's not she didn't forget because she doesn't care. It's that she forgot because she's busy. She's a human being, and we all forget things when we get tied up with 4 and 5 things. So I would like to make a segue and a caveat real quick and say, if you're in an abusive relationship and you need help, there are places to go. Call us here at the Student Wellbeing, and we'll help you find a place to be that's safe. Amber's absolutely right. Abuse, if someone's treating you with contempt 24/7, the sarcasm, the mocking, the criticizing, and they're treating you in that way constantly, that can be a form of emotional abuse, and that is not something you should put up with. And it's a red flag. It's like a red flag waving on fire. And perhaps it's time for you to leave. And if ever it becomes violent, or physically violent, or sexually violent, then it is time for you to be safety first. We can do nothing else until we of ourselves are in a safe place, and then we can start building and working on other things.
And we offer a safe environment to be able to talk about things like that. Like, if you're in that place where you're not quite sure what you're feeling and you need to work out your feelings, this is a safe place to be able to talk and have that support that you need.
Absolutely. So we've talked about complaining, we've talked about contempt. What's the third horseman?
The next one is defensiveness. This one they like to call playing the victim, and this one is way pervasive. Like, a lot of people do this without realizing they're doing it. And this one, you're reversing the blame. So say you forgot to take out the trash. So instead of taking accountability and saying, I messed up, I forgot to take out the trash, instead we flip the script and tell the other person that it's their fault for not reminding them to take out the trash.
Right.
So instead of taking our personal responsibility, it becomes again about blaming the other person for everything that's gone wrong. So in order to combat this horseman, we should own our stuff. Like, we need to take responsibility for our own actions, our own hang-ups, our own issues. So if I'm feeling stressed and I forget something, okay, I forgot it. I'm human. That's okay. But that doesn't mean I get to blame somebody else for me being stressed.
Right. We can't, we also need, well, I guess we also should be very careful about our own emotional baggage.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes someone will say something to me and it triggers some of my emotional baggage, and so my first instinct is to defend that very vulnerable part of myself. Mm-hmm. And it's very easy to step into that defensiveness mode rather than accept responsibility and say, you know what, there's some things in my life that I need to work on. Maybe there's some stuff that happened to me when I was growing up that maybe I need to see a therapist about and work through. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's essential when trying to overcome that sense of defensiveness.
Yes. And you can also, let's say it is that your memory is just terrible. You can go to your partner and say, yeah, I'm sorry I forgot to take out the garbage again. I'm having a lot of problems remembering to do this. Is there something that we can brainstorm solutions to this so it's a little easier for me to remember? So you're not putting the responsibility on them, but then you're working together as a couple to try to find a solution, whether that be an alarm on your phone or putting a note next to your toothbrush so that you remember to take the trash out before you go to bed. The last one is stonewalling, and this is a bad one. Stonewalling is withdrawing to avoid conflict. And so the problem is that it removes the possibility for the conflict to be resolved. And this is absolutely different than taking a break during an argument. A break lets the other person know that you need space, and it comes back to that situation and that problem when you are in a better frame of mind to be able to address it. Stonewalling just refuses to talk about the problem at all. So let's say you forget to take out the garbage and your significant other just ignores you and acts like you don't exist. Or they confront you about it, and instead of you having a conversation about it, you just leave and don't come back to the argument, refuse to talk about it. Stonewalling doesn't even require them leaving the room. You can stonewall somebody just by tuning out the other person and not even listening to what they're saying.
Ignoring is a form of stonewalling.
Yes.
The silent treatment, the cold shoulder. Man, they almost sound like wrestling moves. But
they do.
Like, I'm going to give you the cold shoulder. But stonewalling really is damaging because it denotes that what you believe is a problem is, it sends a message, it's not important to me, or I don't care, or I don't want to argue about this. It's not worth it to me, you're not worth it to me, to resolve the conflict. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's not a healthy thing if there is conflict. Now, I understand that research has shown that most couples will have at least one argument in their life that they will not resolve. And so it can be, hey, you know what? You want the toilet roll on the inside, I want on the outside. Whoever puts it on first wins. So, you know, and it's just something that you decide, you agree to disagree, and you let it go.
Right.
But that is a spoken agreement. You agree to disagree and let it go. That is the resolution you've come to. That the resolution is, it's not worth us losing our marriage over this disagreement, and we're not going to do that, or a relationship. And so we agree to just not sweep it under the rug. We agree to be at odds at this, and that's okay.
Right. Your partner is your companion in life, not your twin.
Yes.
They don't have to be your carbon copy. They're your companion, and companions are allowed to have different emotions and different feelings about different things as long as the two of you can get along and function on a regular basis. So the opposite of stonewalling, as I've said, is taking a break or a psychological self-soothing. And this is saying, look, I need to take a break for a few minutes and we can talk when I get back. Stonewalling shuts down communication. Saying, verbalizing that you need to take a break is open communication, and saying, my emotions are too high right now to have this conversation. You can go out and take a walk, you can go for a drive, you can listen to some music in order to calm your emotions down, and taking a break can be positive and a productive part of an argument.
Absolutely.
So the interesting thing about Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind is that once they forgot all their arguments, they started getting along again. They wanted to be together, and the process of wiping his memories, Joel unwittingly used all of the antidotes that we talked about for Gottman. And he remembered all the things about Clementine that he loved. He was able to have conversations with her using feeling words. He was able to take ownership for the mistakes he made. And above all else, the two of them were able to start actually having real conversations again. Mm-hmm. The end of the movie is pretty open. And maybe they work it out and maybe not. And these tools, that's kind of how it is. These tools will not make a relationship or a couple that's not compatible stay together. However, they will help them communicate and treat each other with dignity and respect and increase the chances if they are compatible.
Yes. What I think is very interesting about this particular idea is that when we're in an argument with our significant other, to stop and to think, what really is my goal here? Mm-hmm. And what really do I want? Is it more like if I was really in love with my wife, which I am, mm-hmm. If you're really in love with your partner and you had to pick between not having your partner around anymore or having the trash taken out perfectly by being with someone you don't like, what would you choose? It seems pretty obvious if this is what's going to make or break a relationship, I'll take the trash out myself. But we forget that. We forget that our goal is, our quality world is to have a beautiful, wonderful relationship. And we get caught up in the minutia and in the little arguments and the pettiness of it. And then we dig it back up again and rehash that argument at some other point in the relationship. And John Gottman was once asked, what do couples fight about most? Mm-hmm. His response? Absolutely nothing. In other words, nothing of importance. It's very trivial what most couples fight about. So the reality is, if we can just learn to do what Joel did, not take a pill and forget and restart all over again, but to take that accountability, to remember what the end goal of the relationship is, which is connection. Mm-hmm. And that all this other stuff, there's the things we need to work on. And yes, sometimes in a relationship, it's okay to put your foot down and be petty about some things. But the reality is you have to determine in your quality world, if this other person is very important to you in that quality world, what are you willing to deal with? What are you willing to let go? What are you willing to work on yourself to make this relationship work?
Right.
That's the end goal. The end goal is connection. So I really appreciate you sharing these 4 horsemen.
Well, like you said, this is vital for people to know, and it is basically a recipe for how to heal and have good, positive relationships rather than sinking into relationship-destroying habits.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
For more information about mental health and wellness, contact Student Wellbeing at 204 Norwood Hall. And you can also give us a call at 573-341-4211.
The song Happy Days is brought to us by music from www.free-stock-music.com. You can also add and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook using our handle at S&T Wellbeing.